On December 11th, 1998, the Mars Climate Orbiter, a spacecraft manufactured by NASA, which was planned to monitor changes in Martian atmosphere, was launched. But what they didn't know was that its mission was going to be cut short to 286 days when it disintegrated into the Martian atmosphere due to a single calculation error. Here's the story. Today, in 2020, NASA spending encompasses a mighty 0.48% of the $4.7 trillion federal budget, or how much the United States wants to spend in fiscal year 2020. The federal budget can be split into defense and non-defense, and NASA falls into the other section of non-defense among many others, such as agriculture, science, and energy. Now specifically, NASA falls under science and occupies a very small percentage of the budget allocated. Since its inception in 1958, NASA has had highs and lows in budgets. Well, I guess one high. After adjusting the values for inflation, NASA's budget from 1958 has been anything but erotic. After its huge peak during the space race, which was a Cold War rivalry between the US and Soviet Union with various space efforts, of which the most famous was who could land the first human on the moon. And since then, NASA's budget hasn't been fruitful, especially after the Obama administration cut NASA funding by about a fifth as part of a restructuring program. In 2020, it's a laughable 0.5% compared to 4% during the peak years of human excitement towards space exploration. So, after the Apollo mission, NASA's pockets weren't so deep anymore. With the onset of rising costs associated with the future International Space Station, NASA began seeking less expensive, smaller probes for scientific missions. And in 1994, the Panel on Small Spacecraft Technology was established to set guidelines for future miniature spacecraft. So, enter the Mars Climate Orbiter, a $300 million spacecraft, cheap and highly effective. The primary science objectives of this mission included determining the distribution of water on Mars, monitoring the daily weather and atmospheric conditions, recording changes on the Martian surface due to wind and other atmospheric effects, determining temperature profiles of the atmosphere, and looking for evidence of past climate change. NASA scientists hoped that such information would aid in reconstructing Mars's climatic history and provide evidence of buried water reserves. After the end of its main mapping mission, which would be on January 15, 2001, the Mars Climate Orbiter would then have acted as a communications relay for future NASA missions to Mars. Now, judging by the title of this video, we both know that plans don't always go to, well, plan. And here's why exactly NASA lost $300 million. See, the cost of the mission was $327 million total for the orbiter and lander, comprising $193 million for spacecraft development, $92 million for launching it, and $43 million for mission operations. So NASA was probably happy by now. It got the Mars Climate Orbiter for a steal. $300 million is chicken change for NASA, considering it spent $152 billion on the Apollo program. The spacecraft was manufactured by Lockheed Martin, a prominent aerospace and defense company, and that name will become very important very quick. So we fast forward to launch day on December 11th, 1998. Spirits are high as the launch is successful. The complete burn sequence lasted 42 minutes, sending the probe into a 9.5-month, 670 million kilometer trajectory, or 416 million miles if you're American. Then, 9.5 months later, disaster strikes. On September 23, 1999, at 9 a.m., the Mars Climate Orbiter began its planned orbital insertion into the Martian atmosphere. 4 minutes later, the Mars Climate Orbiter passed behind Mars, went out of radio contact, and communication was sadly never re-established. The spacecraft encountered Mars at a lower than anticipated altitude, and it was destroyed in the atmosphere. It went up into flames with a fiery finish. On September 25th, 1999, the mission was declared a loss. Reason for loss known, and no further attempts to contact. The cause of failure, you may ask? Unit conversion miscalculation. Yup, NASA didn't check the unit conversions and ended up wasting $300 million of American taxpayer money. Remember the manufacturer, Lockheed Martin? Well, here's why your teachers always told you to remember the units on physics and math tests, so that you can save $300 million when you someday decide to build a spacecraft yourself. See, one piece of ground software supplied by Lockheed Martin produced results in a US customary unit, which was pound for seconds, while a second system supplied by NASA expected those results to be in SI units, or Newton force seconds, which, for simplicity's sake, is like someone using a piece of software to calculate speed in kilometers per second and another using miles per second. Now, $300 million didn't exactly go to waste. The Mars Climate Orbiter captured one of the most sensational and majestic photos to ever grace the Earth. So, you might think NASA was mad, like about to file a class action lawsuit mad, just like consumers did on Apple. Instead, NASA did not place the responsibility on Lockheed Martin for the mission loss. Various officials at NASA have stated that NASA itself was at fault for failing to make the appropriate checks and tests that would have caught the discrepancy. The problem here was not the error. It was the failure of NASA's systems engineering and the checks and balances in our processes to detect the error. That's why we lost the spacecraft. Edward Wheeler, NASA Associate Administrator for Space Science. You may be asking yourself, how can a multi-billion-dollar funded company like NASA not realize that at least something was wrong during test runs? Well, actually, the discrepancy between desired and actual orbit insertion altitude had been noticed earlier by at least 2 navigators, whose concerns were dismissed because they, quote, did not follow the rules about filling out the form to document their concerns. Thank you for watching. Our mission here at Infoverse is to make information available to the universe in a fun and animated manner. So to help me out, please like, and while you're at it, subscribe. The cosmos would approve. Thank you and have a great day.